And now for something completely different part of the day. This isn't supposed to be cerebrally intense by any shape or form, which is good because I didn't realize poor Puya had to present immediately before this session when he was asked to be a part of this.
Should work.
So the whole idea is that none of us in this room have taken the same journey to wherever it is that we are, even if we're at the same level of training. Such is definitely the case for the people who are in front of you. And, you know, the way of moving from teleological to existential. Like, why are we here? How did we get here? And what is it we're trying to do? And how do we do it better together? I think that whole idea of highball being a driving force in really bringing together the European and North American side of things in this particular area of research is really critical. And what you're going to find out, because I'm not going to read their CVs and tell you who they are. From left to right, we have Lotte Ellingsen. You have Puya, who you just heard from. So you heard a bit about his CV. Then Boris Bernhardt, and then Sophie Valk. And I've asked each of them to spend a minute or two telling you in their words about their journey. So I think the microphones are on.
Yes.
Sophie, if you want to start.
What journey should I describe? Like my scientific journey?
How you got here? Well, just what we talked about in the meeting that you were late for. No, just how you were driven to be here.
Well, I have to say, it all started with Boris.
There you go. That's the beginning of the story.
That's the journey.
Before then. What did you do as an undergraduate?
I was born, and then I got lucky enough to get into university. I studied artificial intelligence and philosophy because, well, my name is Sophie, and I also didn't know really what to do. And my friends studied philosophy, and then I wanted to work in the International Court of Justice and fight against genocide. But then for some reason, I drifted off to cognitive science and neuroscience. And then, in fact, I did meet Boris because I was looking for an internship not to get homesick in San Francisco. And then I thought maybe I can try it in Germany. It's a little bit less far. Yeah. And then I got an email for somebody with a piercings with a very boring project, I thought, because it was something MATLAB. And, and I was like, okay. But then it turned out to be kind of something I really enjoyed. And I also was pretty okay at it. So, yeah, now I'm still here.
And now you're here.
I still enjoy it. I'm still kind of okay.
I'm very happy to hear that.
I give it to Boris.
Thank you, Sophie. I work in Montreal, but I was born in Germany. Did my undergrad there also in cognitive science with AI and neuroscience intersection background. And then I wanted to go to Oxford, but they didn't want me. So I ended up at McGill.
Thank you for being at McGill.
And stayed there pretty much ever since, but there was like a brief interlude when I was in Germany, and I met, fortunately, Sophie. And then I came back to McGill, and I'm on staff there since 2016.
Fabulous.
Yes, maybe not as interesting story, but I also changed.
In Iraq, so
it does, yeah.
It's in Montreal, so.
All right, so there was a journey. So yes, I was born in Iran, and I did my bachelor's and master's in Iran, studying electrical and control engineering. Actually, believe it or not, control. So that's where the idea about controlling all started. But the reason I went to control engineering was that I was fascinated by how to control processes in factories. I was dumb, huh? So yeah, I got excited about it, but then I took a job as a control engineer, and I got bored under a year because I found out that in industry, you go and do a project and you learn a bit about it, but then the next project is going to be 99% just copying the previous project and only 1% changing things. And I didn't want that as a career, so I realized that what I'm truly passionate about is research. And kind of luckily, at the same time, I started to get really interested in brain-computer interfaces. Not really having a good idea of like how to do it, I decided I'm gonna do a PhD in it. And I got into a position as in a computer engineering degree for PhD. And through that, when I realized that BCIs are not really useful in the way that I was hoping they would be. Yeah, they have really, really low bandwidths. They're not really that useful. So I got interested in neuroscience. And when in the middle of my PhD, I kind of took a hard turn to make my PhD research more aligned with neuroscience, and I started doing research on working memory, which some of you may be familiar with, which is an extremely confusing concept. So I did a PhD on working memory and modeling working memory, but at the end of my PhD, believe it or not, I was more confused than when I started about what is working memory. And that's why I decided to do a postdoc in something that is more concrete, so doing computational modeling. And from there, I went deeper into like computational modeling, computational neuroscience, and now I'm at McGill. Oh yeah, and actually what my lab is trying to do is to kind of take the same approaches and apply it on working memory so that we can actually say something concrete about working memory. These are probably a bit controversial, but yeah, that was my story.
Yeah, hi. My name is Lotte Ellingsen. I am an associate professor at the University of Iceland and the head of the Faculty of Electrical and Computer Engineering. I'm originally from Iceland and did my undergraduate here in Iceland in electrical and computer engineering. Then after that, I took a year off working at the company Decode Genetics, and that's where kind of I got interested in combining engineering and medicine and applying engineering solutions to medical problems. So I decided to and applied to graduate school and moved to the United States, where I did my PhD in electrical and computer engineering also at Johns Hopkins University. And the reason I chose that university is the close connection to the Johns Hopkins Hospital, and the lab that I was working at was very much affiliated with the medical school where we're doing. So I specialized in image processing, medical imaging, image analysis, and image processing on brain images, and that's kind of how I got into studying the brain. So from there, I got a faculty position in Iceland, but still lived in the United States. So I had a joint appointment, stayed in the United States, but I had a full position in Iceland. Ended up moving back to Iceland in 2017, and that's how I got back here. And I'm running my research lab here at the University of Iceland, focusing on, again, image processing and image analysis.
All right, so now you have a perspective on them. The whole idea here is that I have some questions that we've kind of discussed ahead of time to give them an idea, and a couple of them apiece are going to answer some of them, but the whole reason for sitting up here is to try and share, the things they've learned along the way so that some of you might be able to pick their brains. And we will have a little time to do that up here, although we're squeezed because we all want to go get a beer.
Get a beer now.
Or we could send somebody. Alan, no. Beer. But we're going to go through some of these. But if you have questions that come up that are a burning desire for you to have some of the panel answer, I'd really love you to put your hand up, and hopefully somebody will draw it to my attention. I think I know there are a lot of people here who were on that whole graduate school, postdoc, and maybe even early faculty route. I think the first question to start off with, and I'm going to start off with Boris and Sophie, is what would be your main pieces of advice at this moment in time for people considering entering the job market? You guys can also answer if you want. This is not like exclusive, but How do you guide people in your own lab or people that you meet at conferences about how to go through the process of deciding where it is they want to go next and how to best get there? Uh-oh. Stumped?
I can give answers, but yeah, it's very hard to give advice. If you like a generic advice is obviously like you only live once. Boris told me this today too. No, but you know, do something that makes you happy and pays the bills, right? Maybe figure out what you want and go for it. But I don't know. Like, if it depends really. If Boris would ask me, I would give him a different advice than if Justine would talk to me. Or I don't know. Like, it really depends on the person, right? And I think from there on, one can give better advice, but also, you know, make some mistakes, obviously, along the way. Just move forward. Don't stand still, maybe. And
Got it.
yeah, I don't know, Boris, you have better advice?
Yeah, I think it depends a little bit on which career stage
Yeah.
you're actually talking about. So I think it's generally good to already plan a few years ahead, possibly. So even while you're in the PhD, to already think about the themes that one wants to develop, and then also make maybe the places where one does the training and the supervisors be compatible with these goals. Because at the end, when one goes for a job talk and or interviews, if one is lucky enough to get those invitations, one needs to generally present 3 things. So it's like 3 themes, and they need to be kind of related, but also complementary. So I think this is maybe something that's, at least for me, it helped me. It was tangible advice that I got, and then that one kind of has themes that are also interesting to others, and it's not just an autobiographical exercise, but it's embedded in like a bigger conceptual framework and also something that's novel, perhaps.
Got it. So, quick question. How many people do we have here who are graduate students? Quite a lot. What about postdocs? Okay, so it looks like we have a stronger representation of graduate students, although we're not going to ignore the postdocs, because the postdocs are the ones who are really thinking about the job market right now. I think more of the graduate students are going, what kind of job, right? I mean, Puya, you went through this, right?
Yeah.
And you ended up going a different track and then coming back.
I did.
Which is something that I think a lot of people are not aware of is actually possible.
Yeah, I think if you, it would be really productive, or maybe not productive, but long-term useful,
Right.
if you're not feeling in rush, feeling that you need to get your PhD before a certain age, or you need to get your first position before a certain age, and just try it for what it is. Because even if you talk to 1 million people about their experiences in industry and academia, you'll probably get 1 million different answers. And it's a very personal answer. So my suggestion would be to try it for yourself. You may not need to necessarily go after a job in industry, but you could try a form of internship, for example, at a company, to get a sense of how life in industry is like, and then look at the ups and downs and get to a conclusion for yourself, whether you will be more happy working on ideas that may not work in several years, and you will be perceived as unsuccessful for a couple of years, and in the meantime not making a lot of money, but being happy with the process, or you just want to do something that is more sure and get more money for it. I don't know if that was a good answer, but
No, that's
really,
great.
that's the reality of it, I think.
Yeah, well, and especially in this world that we're in right now and everything you guys were just talking about, I think there are more opportunities in the non-academic sector for a lot of the people who are working in this field right now. It could be in tech, it could be in health tech, it could be, there's a myriad of opportunities that go beyond the academic route, some of which will be very different. And these are things I think it's important for us to get across to the people who are sitting here. So moving on, I threw this one at you, but I think I think it's really important for people to understand that, you know, everything doesn't always go smoothly. So what was the most surprising thing, and this one's going to Puya and Lotta, that you discovered, good or bad, when you were trying to get set up in an independent career?
So I don't know. I wasn't sure how to answer this, but maybe not surprising. But when you're running a research lab, it's a little bit like running a small business. I mean, you need to take care of all the finances. You need to secure funding to be able to hire people to work with you, and PhD students and postdocs. You need to get funding to purchase equipment. You need to manage that equipment and so forth. You need to, you know, organize everything, and you need to also take good care of your students and staff to make sure that you know, everything, your workplace is a successful workplace and a happy workplace. So you need to, you know, take really good care of your kind of small enterprise around you. So I thought that was, you know, not maybe surprising, but maybe not everyone realizes this before they, you know,
so
get into this.
So it's literally your own startup.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
And you're the CEO.
Right, exactly. And you need to, you know, take care of every aspect of it. So.
My take was also very much aligned with Sophia's take, in that I was really surprised to see how slow things are. In my case, it was how slow the progress in research was. Because for me, when I was finishing my postdoc, I was just doing like really hard work. It's like 6 days a week. Every day I would go for like 11 hours and work a lot. Sometimes even Sunday I would work. And I would try to get things to work no matter what. And then when I started my own lab, I soon realized that that's not gonna be what's gonna happen, because you're gonna get graduate students, you're gonna get undergraduate students, and these people, they're gonna need a lot of training before they get to a point that they could really do research and produce results and so on. So for me, that was like a big shock, going for like full speed ahead to like put brakes, put your foot on the brake, and then realize what the reality is and get used to the new reality.
Right, right. Yeah. Okay, so kind of leading on from that, the next one, I've kind of got Boris and Sophie, but you guys can also weigh in. All of these were things that you had to do. How did you learn to people manage in your group at the same time as them having to realize that, you know, you're no longer a postdoc, you're a PI, so you're a boss, not a colleague. And in the context of that, how much effort did you have to put in, and how did you think about creating your own unique, like, lab culture at the same time as doing all this businessy stuff? I mean, I think if any of the graduate students here went into each of your labs, they'd have a different feel. Although I don't know, you two seem to have been tied at the hip moving along, so maybe you have a very different lab culture. But the whole lab culture piece is really important in order to have an environment where people, you know, there's a stamp of you on it at the same time as it being a place where people get to learn, work together, become an individual. How did you go about doing that?
Can I answer the question?
Yeah, no, true. That's
yeah, for sure. I think, and because you mentioned the transition from postdoc to starting the group,
yeah.
I think initially, or at least in my case, I idealized also to be like still this very hands-on scientist who did like a lot of stuff myself. But then I also started.
I remember being one of those too.
And it's also very empowering if one is still able to do all this stuff, and if one can kind of step in, if like, you know, to put out fires and things like that. But then at one point, I think it also comes with the size of the lab and like how good the people are around one that one trains. There is like also like a joy that comes from just delegating tasks to people, and it's actually like also really nice to see other people doing the job really well and that one can trust them. So at least for me, there was a little bit this transition of being like maybe a little bit more hands-on, semi-micromanagerial in some ways, and then going more towards a bit more of a hands-off attitude, and then focusing maybe more on managing people and like seeing like how they can take over responsibilities.
Did you have any kind of performance review type process or expectations that you laid out early on so everybody knew how they would have to operate, or?
It is, I think this is possibly how it should be done. But in my case, it's like very indirect and very vague in the interactions with the trainees. But obviously, I believe in positive reinforcement.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Sophie.
Were a couple of like where I have 2 labs in 2 sides of Germany, right? And
that was the one question I was going to ask. How do you manage to be in 2 places at the same time?
well, I have a couple of clones that are
Excellent.
living like different ideal lives.
Excellent.
No, but so it was the pandemic, and well, everybody knows short-term contracts, and also as a research group leader, I'm not tenured, so I was thinking, yeah, okay, divide and conquer. So why not have 2 groups rather than 1, because you double your chances of something working out. And because of the pandemic, I didn't need to travel, and now after the pandemic and also during the pandemic, people in my lab also moved to other places. So not everybody is where I live, but not everybody or nobody at the moment is in Jülich, but they are all over Germany or even now in Switzerland and the Netherlands. And then I think people in my lab will say, well, I'm very extroverted, but I also communicate a lot, and I also have an okay intuition about people. And then we also decided that we have like monthly sprints where we talk about shared issues, whether it's coding or shared values, or we talk about posters. We have like every month a different topic. We go to the zoo together or to the museum to talk about community. And I think this is one of the core elements of the lab that also reconnects everybody together.
Right.
And it's something I learned from startups, for example. And I think that is really good for the lab culture. In the beginning, I did piggyback a bit on Boris because, well, he has been my mentor and he had already established a successful lab and I was in his Slack. So I also have like this triangle principle that I try to always connect people together. Like we also spoke about this before. So not only trainees, but like Boris and I were also last author on various projects. It's also to kind of hijack his positive culture into my lab because it's a good starting point for me as a kind of trampoline. But yeah, I made a lot of mistakes, obviously. My students taught me so much. They're also my mentors. And to communicating with them about this and also doing evaluations, just admitting and saying nobody is perfect and then moving on, I guess.
So it sounds like you've really put work into being open and transparent and communicative.
Well, I wish I did work, but I'm like a bit disinhibited, right? So I say stuff and then I need to fix it. So I do put work in to be respectful.
Yeah, yeah.
And I should work more on my prefrontal cortex. That's the next step.
But it's working.
Plasticity, that's
right.
Yes.
But I mean, what you're talking about is what some labs really don't have. They don't have the capacity for people to speak up when things are not going quite the way that they like them to. You've created a space where that is welcomed under certain circumstances, right?
Well, yeah, I've seen it going differently, so it's also good.
Yeah.
It's easy to, or not easy, but go where it hurts, right? It's not.
No, absolutely. But if you don't,
yeah, the buy then in the job. It's
yes.
also boring.
Yeah,
no?
there you go.
I'm an adult.
The rot will set in. So, no, it's a great way to be. I mean, that is a lesson, a big lesson for a lot of people to hear.
It also hurts sometimes, guys. So.
No, it really does. I've been there too.
Okay. Well.
I totally get it. Okay, so Boris and Lotte. The hardest thing, the biggest challenge that you had to deal with along the way, that you had to figure out how to get through?
Yeah, I could go first. It's possibly like something obvious because we live in a post-pandemic time. So at least for me, running a lab, not at the beginning of the pandemic, but like towards the end phase of it.
Right.
Was possibly a more challenging time because
possibly.
was likely a more challenging time, not just because of like external factors, but also because multiple trainees, they were expats, so they were basically coming to Canada to study, to do their PhD, and then many of them were maybe also a bit more isolated at home. We had like several lockdowns, so it was not so easy to, you know, for some I was like maybe the only contact they had during the week. So to kind of make sure that people still thrive and are still stimulated. So this was possibly some more challenging aspect of my job. Because it kind of also made us realize how much scientific output and advancement of careers and all that is like fine, but then also it's like also about the experience of working together
as a community
on a project, and you know, like that people interact and share ideas. So it's great that this is kind of over now.
Hopefully. Lotte.
Yeah. So yeah, this was a great challenge that I also, but I wanted to talk about another challenge that I kind of went through in my research career. So I did my PhD. I had my first child a few weeks after I defended my thesis. Took a year off, went back into academia, did a postdoc. And then after this postdoc, I had my second child. And at the same time, I've run into some US visa problems, and I wasn't allowed to work for some period of time. So I decided to take time off and take care of my two small children. That ended up being 4 years of career break as a stay-at-home mom. So, but I was very, passionate for research, and I really wanted to have a research career. And I had kind of thought about going back into academia, but I had, read about people leaving academia for industry, and it was very difficult to get back into academia after, going into industry. And I thought it would be impossible to get back into academia after, taking some time out of the workplace. But this is something I really wanted to do, and in my, the challenges were more in my head, I guess, and in other people's views. People said, you're a mom and you don't have time to write papers and so forth. But this is something I really wanted to do. So after I got my faculty position, it kind of, in retrospect, it was more in my mind than it actually was. So after, of course, I had to read papers and get back into the field and update, my knowledge and, at the time. But after that, it was kind of like I had never left. So, like I said, these challenges and difficulties were more in my head than other people's views, and something that kind of was something that I heard and read, but it wasn't really my experience when I got back into the field.
I would say, listening to you, though, that you probably have to give yourself a little more credit than is due, because almost anybody who's gone through listened to here's how you do an academic career, you don't get off the bandwagon. You don't go into industry and then just expect to step back into. You definitely don't completely step back and be a mom. This is very unusual. It's wonderful that you managed to do that, and that you've got your own group now. You've been incredibly productive. This it kind of leads to like one of the final questions, because please put your hand up if you've got something else.
Can I add one more thing to this?
Yeah, please do.
So when people ask me about this, I say that, and especially to women who are thinking about, wanting to spend some time with their kids, it's totally worth it, I would say.
Yeah.
But, when you come back to academia and after a long break, of course you're going to be behind, those who had a continuous research path. You're not going to have as many publications, not as many citations, and but that's okay, but you will get there. But you are definitely behind, and you need to kind of start from scratch, compared to those who did a postdoc and then took off with their own research and built upon what they were doing. But I think it's okay, and it's worth it. You just have to start over and be okay with being a little bit behind others in in citation numbers and so forth. So
It's a hurdle to overcome, not a brick wall that you can't get through, right? For all of you, and I'm going to ask this to all of you because of the fact that usually it's not asked to a mixed group, but it stems from conversations I've had with my own very smart daughter recently, who was like, "Mom, I'm just not sure about academia versus industry because of work-life balance." And I'm like, "What does that mean?" She's like, "Well, you know, work-life balance." And I've always said to the people in my lab that you can have more flexibility if you are on the ball organizationally, if you're in academia and doing academic research, but that's not necessarily something that filters through, and it's something that is a challenge to people regardless of gender. So I'd like to hear from each of you how you manage to do the whole work-life balance piece. I think it's really important for young people who are, coming up to childbearing age or right in the middle of it, trying to do the best and be ambitious and do everything they possibly can to know that there are different ways of dealing with this. Puya, you haven't spoken for a while.
That's not something we talked about before, though. I'm going to improvise.
I know I didn't originally have you down as somebody to answer this, but now I think it's highly appropriate.
Yeah. I think my answer is probably going to be everyone's answer. I struggled with this, of course, for a long time. I was not married for most of my postdocs. I was free, working for many hours, for many days a week. But then by the time I got engaged, then I started to feel the force behind me to make the balance happen. And the way I somewhat could manage it to some degree, I'm still working on that, is that I started to look at the life side of my life as another work piece, which I have to schedule. And the way I've scheduled it is that I've dedicated my weekend to work that is life, and it's not work. And since our daughter was born, I dedicated an extra day, my Wednesdays, to be with my daughter. And this is on my calendar. This is my daughter's day. And it's been semi-successful from week to week. Sometimes I have to skip those things. And sometimes I actually skip work to do life.
Yay.
Yeah.
Boris.
Yeah, I think there's like multiple answers to this, right? I think one of them is it's a job, like other jobs as well. So I think one can be passionate about it, one can love academia, but I think it's also good to have certain boundaries towards it. So I think the weekend rule to avoid working on weekends is a good one in general. I also personally have like an internal fatigue at one point, like it's between like 5 and 6 p.m. that I just can't work anymore. So at least I need to do something else for a while. And then maybe sometimes if things are like very urgent, there might be like a night shift that's coming up, but ideally it's to be avoided. So yeah, these kinds of things. I think activities outside of academia or social contacts outside of academia also help. So that's like a good suggestion and advice maybe. And yeah, I think Sophie mentioned that we only live once also. So I think at the end, hundreds of thousands of citations need to be counterbalanced with the other experiences that one has.
Sophie.
Yeah, so I also have 2 kids, and I had 1 kid during my PhD already. I don't know, life is for a living, and I think everything can be terrible if you're very stressed, right? And I think life happens to all of us, and there's always responsibilities and things we care about, but in my experience, you can also only do the best work if you also take time to eat and sleep,
Right.
and maybe be happy, about, have fun. And this is like, I have a bit of a hybrid appreciation or like approach to work life, because I kind of always work a little bit, but I kind of always not work a little bit, because I kind of think about everything at the same time and I just vibe with it. But I've also like had a habit of breastfeeding and coding or looking at my phone, mentoring, or and it worked. But then my kid at some point took my face and was like, "Look at me, mom." And this happens.
The wake-up call.
Well, no, not really. I kind of was. I just went on doing, and they're happy. But it's like a balance, all right? And I've been lucky. My kids are very healthy. My partner supports me in my career. But we had a lot of arguments about, everybody who knows. It's like another relationship. That's also like, I do work on weekends if a student has an idea. And sometimes I'm like, okay, I'm cleaning the toilet now. I don't want to talk about this, whatever problem you want to discuss, but it's also more fun than cleaning the toilet. So I'm happy to be distracted. It's like
Science is better than cleaning toilets.
But overall work life, it's hard to. I don't want my work to be the defining feature of who I am, but
it is a defining piece of who we are by virtue of how much of ourselves we put into it, right?
But I still see work as my Sophie project, right? It's for me to develop as a person and to be happy with. But if the whole brain and everything I do, like, I would miss the people in my lab if it would disappear. But it's not in the core of how I define myself. And this way, it can also not touch me beyond 1 week of sadness when something doesn't work out. But you know what I mean? Like, I think that is important for work life.
Be all and end all. Lotte, I'm going to imagine that on this side of things, you taking that time away allowed you to come back with a much clearer perspective on this.
Yeah, well, I think about life and work balance as something that doesn't need to happen every day. It's more of a, something that over time you get a good work-life balance. But I try to, be flexible, and there are times where you need to work a lot, during grant deadlines and paper submission deadlines, and then you don't have much time for your family maybe, but then other times when you can spend more time with your family. Every day I go to work and try to work hard while my kids are at school, and then I go home early and spend time with them while they're awake and home, and then I go back to work when they are asleep.
Right.
And I work weekends if I need to, and so forth. Another thing that I do is that when I go to conferences, I like to take my family with me.
Yep.
So we make nice, family vacations out of these trips, and often get opportunities to visit places that we wouldn't otherwise visit.
Totally. Totally, and that is something that a lot of people don't realize when they're coming up through, that there are doors like that open. Your summers don't have to be shot by, not being able to travel. You just build family travel into that, and your kids will hopefully appreciate it. I'm looking to see if anybody has questions, and I know Alan's question is, when can I have my beer? I see him pacing up and down hastily over there. One of the things I wanted this to do would be to open up who these people are up front to all of you, because some of you might have questions you want to go ask them in the next day or two. They're open. They're open because they're sitting up here and they agreed to do this. So I would very much appreciate it if you would take advantage of them being here and being part of this whole new international community that Highball is bringing together to try and solve problems in ways that we couldn't do in our little small groups. I guess we'll wrap up, but any one final piece of advice to anybody up here as to how they should think about jumping into this next phase of their career? Go on.
One advice. I would say try, during when you're a PhD student or a postdoc, try to get as much experience in grant writing as possible. That is something very valuable when you become independent and need to start writing your own grants. So I was fortunate enough to write my first NIH grant with my supervisor when I was a visiting faculty at Johns Hopkins. I wrote it myself, but it was submitted in his name. He was the PI. But that grant got funded in first submissions. I was very, very good with that. Then I got a chance to organize this research project and supervise PhD students and get published papers where I was the last author, and this all helped me tremendously when I was then writing my own grants. And so I would say, when you write your first grant, team up with a senior researcher who is experienced in writing grants. This art writing thing is kind of an art. This grant writing thing is kind of an art, and it requires certain skills, and you need to know the rules of the game to be successful. So having an experienced grant writer on your side when you write the grants, it's very valuable.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not going to say anything new. I'm just going to repeat one of the things that I said already. Think of your career as one of the biggest decisions you want to make. So don't rush into making that decision. Just take your time. Don't be afraid to change course. Take time. Get behind other people, and just make sure that you will make the decision, you'll make the choice that you'll be happy for a long time. That's what I would say.
Yeah, obviously I agree with both of the advices given already. I think from my perspective it's really crucial that one identifies good mentors, and works with them and nurtures this relationship in a way. And this does not necessarily need to be somebody at a higher career stage. I think it's as important that the people work with their peers in developing projects. Just for me, as an example, I work with my old mentors, I work with the students from my lab, but I also work with a lot of the people that I've met along the way, who were at a similar career stage. So I think this is basically, when starting a lab or when wanting to grow the lab, this can be a very critical component also of independence. And I think initially this is something that at least the faculties and the departments encourage you to be, that it sometimes takes time to build senior author level projects with the students because they need to be trained. So this is a longer term process in a way, but I think initially also just the loose collaborations that one has with maybe fellow postdocs or fellow PhD students, that's equally valuable and important. So be nice to your colleagues, folks.
Agreed. Sophie.
So I also agree with what has been said. I think trust yourself also and your inner voice. It's always easy to look at others who you admire, who are successful, who do things differently than you and wish you were them. But I think ultimately you're unique with your skills and your interest, and really learn to nurture those and trust in this, even if this is something that is off the beaten path, is maybe what people advise you not to do. Trust your inner vibe, right? And even if it's unconventional, it's a superficial life advice, but I have not always listened to Boris, and still I'm here.
So
No.
basically the summary here is keep mentorship close at the heart of your community. Those will also be the people that tell you that you might not be listening to your inner voice.
Maybe, yeah.
Right?
For sure.
They're the people who are most likely to be doing that at the end of the day, having a beer at a conference, which should segue us into the reception. Each of these are really critical pieces of the whole, how you have confidence.
Be kind.
And be kind.
That's
bet.
maybe very important.
Be kind, be open, be willing to admit you're wrong.
Of course, always.
Not everybody does. each of these are pieces of the whole, how you become part of an important part of a community. And that's at our level, it's at the postdoc level, it's at the graduate student level, it's at the undergraduate researcher level, right? Practicing each of these things is going to be something that will allow anybody here to be able to be up here in a couple of years. So I'd like to thank everybody up front for being willing to offer their time to be here for this and for answering any questions you might have. And I think it's time for the reception. Thank you.